นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening. We haven't had a Zoom session like this for a while because this last month has been the period we call the Katina season, where Buddhist monasteries all over the world have Katina ceremonies or different cloth robe offering ceremonies, depending on the place and how many monks have lived in that place for the range retreat, the annual range retreat. It's a time of movement, so we're often going away for short periods of time to visit other communities, give them support, meet them after the long 3 months range retreat. So it's a bit like lay people's retreats. Many of you have been on meditation retreats and you know what it's like when you finish the retreat and there's a burst of activity and you start moving around doing other things. You've been still meditating for a while and then all the plans and activities come up. Monasteries tend to be the same. So after the range retreat you have a burst of activity, movement to other monasteries, and then later, as it's summer or coming into summer here in Australia, then sometimes monks will go out wandering in the traditional way, either wandering from forested area to forest or from monastery to monastery. But nowadays the additional kind of wandering is from airport to airport or train or car. Because of technology, nowadays monks can wander a lot further around the globe. But still, it's the same principle that outside of the rain season and the range retreat, monks can often wander a bit or move around. Ajahn Kalyano used to warn the monks at this time and say, well, you ask yourself, if you are moving somewhere or traveling somewhere, what's the purpose? Bring up mindfulness and bring up clear comprehension and ask yourself, what are you doing and why? What's the purpose? Because some monks used to ask Ajahn Kalyano for permission to go wandering in the jungle, in the forests, to another part of Thailand, maybe from where they had spent the range retreat. And sometimes Ajahn Kalyano might be suspicious and say, do you really want to wander in order to improve your practice, to put forth more effort to fight your greed, anger and delusion, abandon craving and attachment, to develop more insight and meditation skills in samadhi and wisdom? Or do you just want to go for fun? Do you just want to travel in the way many people do in the world, like a holiday or just out of curiosity, try here, try there, go here, go there? And he'd sometimes tease the monks. He'd say, oh, you go looking for a nice quiet place in the mountains, saying, I'm going to go and meditate on this quiet mountain somewhere up north. Now, after staying there for a while, you say, oh, the food was terrible, the weather was a bit tough, the conditions were difficult, and you go back down to somewhere nearer the city where you get more food offered and the conditions are comfortable. Then after a while, staying in the comfortable monastery near the city, the monks will say, oh, but there's too much food here and too many people and too much happening, I can't meditate. So then they go off looking for a nice quiet mountain again. And Ajahn Kalyano would tease them, because this kind of dynamic, you're moving from place to place, trying to find the right place, is a very common thing for Buddhist monks. We're the homeless ones. We don't have a home or a mortgage, but because of that, it's easy to move. But then maybe sometimes you're just moving because of your desires more than from your wisdom. And so there's this dynamic of moving from one place to another, trying to find just the right situation with the right climate and the right number of people and the right food and the right accommodation and this and that. You can try and find the perfect place, and of course never achieve it. And then come back to the monastery again, disappointed, ready for another rainy season and another range retreat maybe. So sometimes he'd even joke and say, you really don't need to go wandering in the forest to practice the Dhamma of what the Buddha taught. And he encouraged one monk, he said, just put all your things in your monk's bowl, which is what we use as a travel bag. We don't have a suitcase, but we have a monk's bowl which can carry our robes. You put it on your shoulder and you have an umbrella for the rain. And you start walking, but don't walk anywhere, just walk around the perimeter of the monastery. Like Ajahn Chah's monastery, they built a wall around it after a while, so it was a large forest, but it had a wall all the way around it. And he said, just walk on the track next to the wall around the perimeter of the monastery from morning until night. You'll walk many kilometers just going around in a circle. That's tudong, that's wandering in the forest, isn't it? You've got the shade of the trees of the forest, of the monastery. You're moving maybe many kilometers if you walk a long way. But then you come back and you just put up your umbrella and make your little camp in the forest of the monastery. And that's exactly the same as wandering up north or to the east or the west or wherever people want to wander. Same sort of thing, without having to go anywhere. He would joke, and he actually made one or two monks do that. Of course, most people don't want to do that because part of the desire is to see new places, meet new people. Where's that coming from? Well, it comes from our desires, isn't it? That's life. We're always looking for new things, new experiences, new life, you might say. But if we're honest, deep down, that's coming from attachment, from craving and attachment. But Ajahn Chah wouldn't put the monks down like we believe Ajahn Chah was a very wise, compassionate person. Because he was an arahant, so we believe. And a truly wise person doesn't put down another person who may have less wisdom, but they try to find skillful means to help them, to understand more, to be wiser. That's the difference, say, between worldly knowledge and knowledge of the Dhamma. Ajahn Chah had knowledge of the Dhamma, so he'd use that to teach people. So he might point out their faults or their weaknesses sometimes, but he wouldn't do it in a way where he's just putting them down or being negative for the sake of it or complaining about them, criticizing them. He'd say things that might help arouse urgency in the practice or help them to see where they may be going wrong in their practice, in their thinking or their approach. But he wouldn't be saying things just to hurt them or give them a hard time with no real reason. Because he was a wise teacher. And that's true wisdom. In the world, we use knowledge and what you might call worldly wisdom to get jobs and make money and earn a living and do all kinds of things in the world, but it's for our own more selfish reasons, isn't it? To be more successful, to gain honor and fame and fortune and money and get more friends and more power and more status and all the things, what we call worldly success. You use your knowledge, your wisdom for that, but at the same time you're often kind of treading on other people as you follow your own knowledge and use it to be successful in the world. Often it's at other people's expense, isn't it? So often you're competing with others and you have to get other people out of the way. We compete for jobs and positions and compete to buy a house, and we compete to get into a school, and we compete for this and compete to be well known and liked, for power, for status. But it's often at other people's expense, and we often use our knowledge to get the better of others and put them down and clear the road for ourselves, as it were. Whereas a truly wise person in Buddhism doesn't do that. Their wisdom is coming from true knowledge of suffering, the Four Noble Truths, and what is the cause of suffering, and the way of practice for the end of suffering. And that leads directly to compassion. So wisdom and compassion, in terms of Dhamma, are totally linked. And so a teacher like Ajahn Chah or the Buddha or any other teacher will use their knowledge and wisdom to help people. Doesn't mean to say they always say what you want to hear, because a teacher will often point out where your faults are or your weaknesses are, but in a way that will help you to grow, to learn. That's, you might say, the characteristic of true wisdom. Another thing Ajahn Chah, like the Buddha, would do, he'd say, well, don't waste your time. So if it is this time of year, the summer, where people do travel a lot, move around a lot, that can be useful in our practice, to change places, face new experiences. It can be a learning experience, can help us. But don't waste time, because we also waste a lot of time. You go on holiday and you spend a lot of time lying on the beach or sampling different kinds of food or whatever it is people do. Often they get quite lost and forget the Dhamma practice until they get back to work, and then they're having stress and suffering from work, so then they think of the Dhamma teachings. So one thing Ajahn Chah would emphasize over and over again is, the sense of urgency in the practice. Keep coming back to the importance of practicing, whether you're in a monastery or traveling, whether you're a monastic or a lay person and you're working or you're at home. We've got to use our time well, and Ajahn Chah would encourage this sense of urgency in the practice. You really don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Who can predict what will happen in the world tomorrow, what will happen in our own life tomorrow? We don't know how long we've got in this world. We don't know how long the conditions for our practice will be good. How long we'll have access to the Dhamma, places to meditate, access to the teachings, chances to make dana offerings. We don't know. We don't know about our health, how long our health will support the Dhamma practice. You notice one of our habits is that we tend to become complacent in life very easily. Once we've got a certain level of happiness, we've got the food we need, some place to stay, some money available, we can buy the things we need, then we often kind of go quiet, the mind goes quiet, that sense of urgency disappears, and it's replaced by could be apathy, laziness, or just pottering around but not really pursuing the mind, to purify the mind, to abandon craving and attachment. So teachers like Ajahn Chah are always arousing this sense of urgency, reminding us that life is impermanent. We don't know how long we've got. And it goes according to causes and conditions. It's not under our control. We can only influence and control life a little bit. But we say, this body and mind and what we call life, these are things that are not self. We can influence causes and conditions, but ultimately we don't control everything. So you can't make yourself stay healthy when sometimes we get sick. You can't stop that maybe, because it goes according to causes and conditions. You can't say don't be sick to your body, or don't get old, or don't have this problem or that problem. Things arise due to causes and conditions. And that's where you really see not self. There are often causes and conditions giving their results, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that's a whole reflection in itself. But as you hear the Dhamma regularly, and that helps to bring up this sense of urgency, well, it reminds you to keep practicing and keep putting effort into the practice. Again, a lot of our practice is kind of very casual, half-hearted, because we become complacent. Then it doesn't really go in very deep. You may hear some Dhamma, you may go to a temple or a monastery, make some offerings, hear the Dhamma, go home, and for a little while you're kind of energized in your practice, you're boosted in your practice, but then it kind of fades away, the energy fades, and you're back to a more kind of casual or lethargic approach to the Dhamma. It's quite common. And they have a saying, don't they, if you need hot oil in order to cook an item of food. Say you're cooking donuts. You need hot oil, boiling oil, for the donuts to actually cook and come out crisp and edible. If the oil is not hot, the dough that makes the donuts will not get crisp. Those donuts will not be very nice to eat. They'll be soggy or soft. You need hot oil in order to cook something. And that's used as a kind of a comparison. Just as you need hot oil to cook food, to get it really cooked, well, you need to really put effort into your Dhamma practice for the results to come, for the success to happen. So a lot of our meditation is like oil that is not very hot. So the dough stays soggy and uncooked. Our mind stays caught into the defilements. Greed, anger, delusion, lack of mindfulness, lack of wisdom, lack of compassion. The mind is in a more coarse state because our oil, the oil of mindfulness and wisdom and the effort we put into our practice is not yet at boiling point. Our mind is not matured or cooked, as it were. In Thai, the word for mature and cooked, is the same, suk. And same for ripe fruit as well. All the things that kind of ripen naturally. It's like that. You need something to ripen. In terms of your mind, to ripen or mature, it needs effort in the practice. Just as the donuts need the hot oil to be cooked. So that's something to reflect on. What is the quality or the level of my effort in my daily practice? Not just when I'm on retreat or in a monastery or with fellow practitioners, but at other times when you're working or shopping or relaxing. How hot is your oil then? Do you just let everything just go soggy and don't keep your oil on the flame? Do you just let your practice go to pieces and you don't keep practicing, so the oil of your mind goes really cold and hopeless and can't cook anything? It's like every day people come and see me and they say, "Oh, my meditation is getting really bad these days," or "I'm not meditating at all," or "I can't make my mind peaceful, I'm not mindful, I just sit there falling asleep." How often do we hear that? It's just another way of saying, "Oh, my oil is not boiling yet. I've taken the heat off." So we have to find ways to put effort into the practice, keep going, get this sense of urgency. Just traveling from place to place, well, it can help you, but probably it just becomes distraction, doesn't it? Like those monks who say, "I went one place and there was too much food, and another place not enough food." Practice becomes like that. You're just constantly judging and comparing, competing. But the real practice, you don't actually need to go anywhere. It's like, what are you doing with your mind right now, right here, right now, today? Where's your mindfulness? That's a phrase that you hear in a monastery sometimes. The teacher will say, "Where's your mindfulness? How mindful are you?" Because we love to be not mindful. That's our habit. That's our past. In the past history of each person, the majority of time has been less mindful, and the times when people are mindful are few and far between. And that's why they're not arahants. If we were all perfectly mindful, we would be arahants. There'd be no more need for Dhamma talks or Zoom sessions, meditation retreats, and all the things we do. But unfortunately, we haven't reached that time yet, and one of the reasons is our oil is not hot yet. Our oil is still too cold, and our food is still soggy and uncooked. So we have to go a bit further in our practice and try harder, put more effort in. It's like the Zen monks in days of old, they do their meditation, and if they dropped their effort and they started to slouch a bit, they wouldn't sit up straight, they start to nod off, fall asleep, then another monk would come along with his little bamboo stick and he'd tap them on the shoulder. If you're meditating, you get a tap on the shoulder, what happens? It wakes you up. You have a sense of urgency. Oh, I'm falling asleep. Maybe you feel embarrassed that you've received a tap on the shoulder, so that embarrassment makes you try harder. Maybe that's a good way to meditate. You have someone with a little stick tapping you on the shoulder when you're not mindful or when you're falling asleep. The very first time I went to India and sat under the Bodhi tree, I went with a group of monks and lay people, and we've been travelling all day from Calcutta on a train. We were really tired and exhausted. We got to the Bodhi tree, but we're so inspired. We said, we've arrived at the Bodhi tree. We arrived at like 8 p.m. or something, exhausted. We said, but we've got to stay up and meditate. The Buddha meditated all night. So we meditated all night. It was really hard work. The mosquitoes were loving it, they were biting everyone. The weather was really cold because it was winter. The stone floor was really hard and we had no cushions because we were travelling. But we said we're going to stay up all night to honour the Buddha and practice. But there was a little group of Japanese people sitting with their teacher, their Roshi, the Zen monk. And he sat absolutely straight all night, because I watched him a few times through the night, and I never once saw him nod. I thought, all that tapping with the bamboo, it really does work, it pays off. You end up with monks who can sit all night without falling asleep, dead straight, and no doubt his samadhi was pretty good as well, because if you've got samadhi, you can sit straight. If you don't have much samadhi, you tend to fall asleep. It's just cause and effect, isn't it? So we have to find ways to arouse energy and effort in the practice. We have to find ways to sit up straight, sit longer maybe. Someone was asking this morning, they say, what should I do when my mind becomes peaceful? The mindfulness is there, I'm aware of the breath. What should I do next? And I would say, just carry on, keep doing it as long as you can. If you don't have any important appointments, well, just keep meditating. Because if you reach that state when your mindfulness is quite continuous, quite strong, you'll probably find the pains and discomfort in your body don't bother you at that point. You're quite comfortable and happy to keep meditating, so why not? Just keep going. Many times myself or other monks I know been meditating in the morning and you're so peaceful and the mindfulness is strong, you don't want to waste that experience, so you just keep meditating and end up missing your meal, which means a lot for a monk, because a monk only eats one meal a day. But if you're that peaceful, you're willing to do that. Sometimes it's some other activity, you miss it because you're peaceful. That's different from missing things because you're lazy, that's not the same. But if you're actually peaceful, mindful, sometimes you miss things. Or for me, when I first went to Thailand, I found practicing meditation in the heat quite challenging because I came from the UK, which is normally cold. So I had to get used to the heat, and I found, like many people, the heat makes you sleepy. So what do you do? Well, Ajahn Chah said, if you're sleepy, eat a bit less. So you reduce your food. But then sometimes you reduce the amount of food you eat, you feel tired because you don't get so much food, and then that also makes you sleepy. So it's quite a challenge. You've got to balance eating a bit less so that you're not over full, because that makes you sleepy, but not eating so little that you've got no energy and that makes you sleepy. So as a whole thing you had to learn how to eat the right amount of food every day. And then how to keep your meditation going when it was really hot, especially in the hot season. Could get up to 38, 40 degrees sometimes in the middle of the day. So you're learning to sit in the heat, sit straight, sit still. It wasn't easy, but I found in the evening, usually about 5 or 6 p.m, when the heat of the day started to, the temperature would go down because the sun started to go down. I found at that time I digested my food and the heat of the day was fading. I could sit meditation better than any other time. So my first few years I found that my favorite time to meditate, where I could put forth a lot of effort and not have so much sleepiness, was about 5, 6 p.m. in the evening. When I first went to Thailand, they'd always have the afternoon drink, which is your only kind of refreshment and energy boost in the latter part of the day. That would be at 2 p.m, followed by a long session of sweeping and hauling water from a well, because there was no pipe water in those days. You'd sweep the monastery through the afternoon. But then later they moved the drink time to 5 or 6 p.m. in the evening, which meant I'd have to make a choice. I either do my meditation at 5 or 6, because it was a good time for me to meditate, or I go and have my sweet tea, sweet coffee, sweet cocoa, Pepsi Cola, whatever was available, if there was. It wasn't always a sure thing, but if there was a drink, that's when it would be. So I had to make a choice. And sometimes I was just meditating at 5 p.m. and I thought, oh, I could go and have a nice drink now and have a chat and meet my friends. Or I carry on meditating. So it'd be a real battle sometimes. Part of you wants to have that sweet drink, go and talk to your friends. The other part says, no, you're meditating well, just keep meditating. Quite difficult. So sometimes I learned to do that, just to give up the desire for anything else other than just to be mindful and keep going. Because I could see if you keep stopping when you're practicing mindfulness, you give up, then of course your samadhi doesn't really arise, your insight doesn't really happen, because you keep stopping. What you might call the stop-start approach is not the best approach in meditation. It's like your oil never gets hot. Your food never gets cooked, because you keep stopping. So sometimes you have to learn how to keep going, even when there's, a little bit of pain, as long as it's not kind of a tortuous level of pain or something really unpleasant, really difficult to be with. If it's just a bit of pain, discomfort, or you feel tired, well, sometimes you just have to learn to sit through it. It's quite common that when you meditate, there will be obstacles that come up. Especially the more effort you put in, the more these obstacles seem to come up. A very common one is different, you might call them psychological pains or blockages that people start to notice when they're meditating. Sometimes we say it's karma, old karma. So a very common one is people get a chest pain. Normally they don't feel any pain in their chest, but as soon as they start meditating and putting effort into their meditation, they start to feel like a knot or a block in the chest. It can be quite painful, and it seems almost like there's something solid there. It's probably just a feeling, but it seems to come up when they meditate. Other people get headaches, even strong headaches. Other people, it's feelings of pain in the leg or the knee or some part of the body. When they're not meditating, they don't feel anything. As soon as they're meditating, putting effort, these obstacles come up. Sometimes it's in the passages of the airways of the breathing process. So it could be your sinuses or the nose or in the lungs. Normally no pain and discomfort at all, but as soon as they meditate, it comes up. So many people will give up at that point. So their oil never gets hot, and their meditation never really gets very deep, because they always give up. As soon as there's discomfort, they stop. Or they feel tired and they stop. When the mind is restless, they stop. It's the stop-start approach. So it's quite hard to progress when you're still stuck like that, or you're a prey to your moods. So as soon as you don't feel happy about your meditation, you stop, you give up. But the ones who seem to get progress, get insight and really progress in their practice are the ones who don't give up. And they're willing to work with and be with various feelings or mental states or physical sensations. They make them the objects of their mindfulness. They keep going. Bit of pain, keep going. Bit of sleepiness, keep going. A restless mind, keep going. And these kind of karma, different blockages come up from karma, you can work through them. And they start to fade. Maybe sometimes they disappear altogether and you realize, oh, it's not always like that. There's not always that blockage of pain in the chest or the headache or the restless mind or the sleepiness. You realize it's not always there. It may return, but over time you start to become more skilled in working through it. Establishing mindfulness, just knowing it. Oh, there's this feeling, or there's this way of thinking, or this memory. It can be mental or physical. But this is what we call working through the obstacles. So it's not the stop-start approach, it's the continuous practice approach, if you want to give it a name. We have to learn not to quit, not to stop, not to give up. You keep going, and then you learn things, and you learn to develop a new attitude or a different attitude to some of these obstacles. And they kind of shrink in their experience, in your experience of them. The pain seems to shrink down and even disappear. Or the emotional reaction to a certain memory or a certain way of thinking starts to shrink, fade, and you feel better, and you feel more able just to know it and let it go. It doesn't trigger a lot of mental proliferation, anxiety, worry, restlessness. And sleepiness the same. We learn to get through sleepiness. And many meditators I know have learned to face sleepiness, deal with it, and then go through it, go beyond it. And the mind becomes much stronger. They become like that Zen monk in India. They learn to be able to sit through anything. And that's the aim of the practice, to be mindful of everything. Not to give up, not to give in to the moods or the painful feelings, but to keep going. And when you learn to do that, then you can keep going, you can keep sitting maybe much longer than you used to. You start in the beginning, maybe you can just sit for 15 minutes or walk meditation for 15 minutes. But then you gradually extend the time, and maybe you learn to sit for an hour or walk meditation for a whole hour without stopping. Then you can extend that, 2 hours, 3 hours. Many people have breakthroughs where they have these obstacles come up, but they keep meditating through them, just being mindful of them, and then get beyond them. The sleepiness disappears, the painful feeling disappears, the worry, the anxiety disappears, and it's like they're free, and they know they're free, so they get a lot of energy, a lot of boost in their practice, much happier, and the mind becomes more stronger, confident because of it. And when the monks do go wandering in the forest in the summer or the dry season, often that's one of the aims, is to increase levels of patient endurance with the practice, learning to face different obstacles, like maybe not always getting enough food or enough rest, or facing different conditions. But you gain experience when you face the things that come up in your mind, the different moods and thoughts. You realize they're impermanent, they're not self, and you can let go of them. Then your mind becomes a lot bolder, and you can use that over and over again. It becomes knowledge or insight. This is wisdom. The kind of wisdom then you can share that with others, like Luang Por Chah. All his descriptions of his own practice, which you can read about these days or listen to, they're there for inspiring other people to practice as well. So really, we sometimes have to we listen to the Dhamma from the teachers first to get that sense of urgency and put effort into the practice, but then really we have to learn how to arouse ourselves, push ourselves to keep practicing. Remind ourselves that life is impermanent. We won't always have the chance to meditate, hear the Dhamma, practice the Dhamma. We don't know how long we've got. So make use of the time while you have it. Maybe for tonight I'll just give you these reflections, and if anyone has any questions afterwards, we can try to answer them for you.